Okay. Ready? Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, I support you. Today's shout out is for Fine, or Fiend, I'm not sure which. It's F-E-I-N, Dining. They are fun. Says Jen and Drew. Why start a YouTube channel at their advanced days? Well, why not? Always looking out for new and exciting eats. People enjoy food reviews, blab, and food stuff. They do cute little skits, very interesting reviews. They are a charming couple. So check them out, like, share, comment. Also, a little bit about our shout out. It will start on Monday with our Murder Monday. A secret word will appear 3 times. Beginning, middle, and end. I don't know what the word will be, so keep an eye out for that. Comment the word in the chat, or in the comment. Yeah, comment in the comments. That makes sense. Where else would you comment? I don't know. I'm
not. To comment on your elbow and show it to the camera.
I'm not tired, guys. This is what happens when they leave me in charge of doing these things, and I'm tired, and my head hurts, and I can't think straight. Anyway, you guys know what to do. No, you can't. First of all, you're not dependable. Anyway, I had a point. Check out our friends at Finite Dining. Be prepared for entry of our giveaway starting on Monday for Murder Mondays. And when will the winner be announced? Probably around the 9th of July now, because why not? And that's my birthday, and I can give away something for my birthday, so why not? Yeah, that's a thing. Check out our coming up next link. Check out our shout out. Check out each other, and have a good day. All right, tell us something, Mr. Joe.
All right. We're going to lead off today. We're going to talk about transportation a little bit. Okay. Go back to ancient times. People had 1 or 2 forms of transportation. You had your feet, or people started using horses to get around with. As civilization started to improve, you did have some people that came up with, chariots, wagons, other forms of moving transportation from point A to point B. Well, out here in the South Dakota, in the western half anyway, one of the first things that they came across for transportation arrived about 1877. At that time, the Dakota Territory Legislature authorized the construction of a road from Bismarck to Deadwood. Now, a lot of people might look at the map and go, that seems a little roughshod. Well, it was. The main point that they had was, again, point A to point B. 240 miles, any number of little streams and creeks to cross in the process, rivers. And what they did is that they founded a company to open up this trail to Deadwood. First stagecoaches left on April 11th with 68 passengers, and they started running tri-weekly stages on May 2nd. Soon they were running on a daily basis. The company operated 26 stagecoaches. They also started working with freight wagons, pulling 200 teams of horses. In addition to freight and passenger revenue, the company was also awarded an annual mail contract. So this road started getting a lot of traffic through it. Now, in an effort to keep these lines running, they would set up stations along the road. There was 20 of them that were designed. Basically, that way they could get fresh horses as needed, or if they there was actually 2 spots that were set up so that people could sleep overnight and be ready to take off the next morning. This particular line, we actually visited nearby one of these sites at Sulphur. You can actually see where the markers are at certain places, like near Meadow, South Dakota. And that particular line also came down through Empire over to Crook City, and then eventually entered down to Deadwood via the Whitewood Creek area. Now, this company also set up headquarters in Bismarck at Main and 9th Street, employed 175 men, and by the summer of 1878, the editor of a Denver newspaper proclaimed the Bismarck routes from North Pacific Railway is the best patronized road running into the Black Hills. A year later, all the rooms at Bismarck hotels were filled with people for this boom. Now, interestingly enough, the railroad decided to suddenly stop. They had completed the railroad all the way to Pierre. This opened up the second major leg of the railway. Fort Pierre went to Deadwood, cut the route down by about 60 miles. Again, they had to reestablish routes cutting through the state, down through Rapid, and then up to Deadwood. This line does have a few other, namely reminders, and actually follows a lot along our now Highway 14, by Midland, by Phillip, by Grindstone. It crosses the Cheyenne River back where Smithville used to be. It would come across and then down close to Wasta, also by the wonderful named Lakeview, that lakeside. There is no lake, there is no side to it. And then it would cut up close to where Highway I-90 is now. But in 1980, the company decided, since the Bismarck was no longer the closest point, it shut down all major shipping there. There were still people that would use that travel point, but not nearly as much anymore. When they opened up the Fort Pierre line, they also started using what were called bull trains. And you could have anywhere from 60 to 120 bulls pulling wagon trains all the way from Fort Pierre. Now, the second route had its own little strike of creativity, because there were certain parts you would not transport across, either due to cold weather. There's one spot over between Grindstone and the Cheyenne River that was famous for people camping there, waiting for the weather to improve. Also with the second route, you ran into the problem of running into things like gumbo situations where the soil was really kind of loamy in condition. These routes wound up working pretty good. The downside of the second track, there were cases where a normal route might take you 2 to 3 days. If you wound up doing it in the winter, you might be out there for 2 to 3 months. Again, they also established station cases. Our famous one called Climax was along this line. Now, the other interesting part with this system of highways that they built, there was actually several others. The primary three was Bismarck, Fort Pierre, and one down called Niobrara that actually followed the White River back and across. The big problem with these three is that there was also ones that came up out of Custer, Cheyenne, and down by Chadron. The downside those three had is that they did not, they were not cost effective. They tended to need to charge a bit more due to the terrain that they were going through. A lot of them had to try to cut through the Black Hills, which at that time was kind of a roughshod prospect. And then, of course, once the railroads were established and were able to connect eastern South Dakota to western South Dakota, pretty much the stagecoaches had a very limited lifespan after that. Deadwood would still rely on the Fort Pierre trains to bring things like gunpowder and other provisions cross-country because, well, railroads weren't key on moving gunpowder. But it's a little piece of the history that they had around here. And of course, once the railroad came into being, it had its own advantages and disadvantages. One of its advantages, you could move a lot of people via the railroads. The two downsides is that sometimes you would have a case where the railroad could only go to certain places, whereas a stagecoach could take and navigate, 3 to 5 miles off the trail if they were going to go hit a particular homestead, whereas a train, you pretty much just went right on by the site. It also led to some of the towns becoming ghost towns, because if your town happened to miss the railroad, like Menaloosa did, your town basically dried up and died. The other little fun thing that they have to run into with railroads is the fact that you had regular gauge and you had narrow gauges. Mostly your narrow gauges were used by mines, some farming communities. that way they could do their supply runs back and forth a little bit easier. The downside is that, obviously your wider gauges couldn't run on the smaller gauges. They relied on towns like Belfouche, once they were constructed, to be able to make those transfers for your grains, your fruits, your beets, other products to get out to market. And of course, once the railroads stopped being able to use certain railroads for like the mining and stuff, they basically sat idle. One of the more famous railroads that we had up here was a railroad called the Crouch Line. This line ran for about 30 years. It went from Mystic all the way back to Rapid, and it crossed the Rapid Creek, I think, 26 times. They said it had so many turns that the engineer could slap the hands on the guy on the caboose on some of the passes that were so tight. Sadly, that railroad is no longer in existence. It wound up getting, a lot of the trestles were washed out during the '72 flood. But this is how our transportation started to develop out here, and of course the big major step came from the invention of the automobile. Roads. They started, of course, with your old-fashioned dirt roads, which were great at stranding Model Ts and some of your earlier cars. Eventually they came up with gravel, asphalt, and then eventually concrete. Each of those things had their own little pluses and minuses. Some places around here, even now, you wouldn't take a front-wheel drive car in, just because you wouldn't get up the hill. Of course, then there's some spots where we've seen trucks get stuck too. It all depends on if you're trying to drive in the middle of the winter. But, this is some of the transportation issues that they've always had here in South Dakota. The one that always strikes fun to me is in 1949, there was a blizzard bad enough. My dad couldn't go out and play in it. His brothers were worried he'd fall into a snowdrift and disappear. Of course, when the snow is taller than the locomotives, that's kind of understandable. But anyway, thanks for the little trip, and shortly we'll be starting to work on some of the other smaller towns, maybe tell some of the stories of places that went through. Sulphur, Grindstone, maybe up by Buffalo, Riva, and some of those places, and we'll share some of the tidbits we've learned and found. This is Joe for the Mud Files, the Bearded Historian. You folks have a good one.
You failed.
What, I get 10 minutes?
I was about to say, that shit was short. Oh.
I wish I would have started digging up some of my stuff with the pictures.
This is what you get when you put him in charge and don't give him a target. If you guys have suggestions, we have had the Gettysburg, which I'm sure he'll not enjoy looking into. And on scene, which we're going to do at a piece of the Berlin Wall, which is near our, in our city. That'll be live from the scene kind of thing. When we move, we'll do some other more interactive. I am going to look into pictures as soon as I figure out how to combine audio and pictures. A slideshowy thingy with the pictures like in front and Dad's voice in the back.
Oh, I know how to do that.
She knows how to do that, so maybe we'll try that. Because I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do a lot of things, so. We're at 11 minutes. I'd like to do 15. Giveaway. So far, our giveaway announcement has broken twice. I blame AAP. I tried to shout out his other channel. It broke everything.
Evil man.
I'm going to try it again. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just the heat. Who knows? I don't know. Anyway, we are at 12 minutes.
They should tune in and try to see when we preview the new house once we get over there.
Yeah, we are going to preview a new house. I don't know if we're going to do that live or a premiere. We'll decide probably the first because, reasons. Also, there will be a live on the 4th of July. Time? Dusk. We'll be doing the fireworks. So, whenever they start, that's when the live will start.
Tuned for about 9:30 p.m. that evening.
Joe says about
9:30 Mountain Standard Time.
Mountain Standard Time. I'm terrible with times. I never know what time zone I'm in. But people ask, so don't ask me. Because I'll have to ask him. Because I can't remember. I always want to say Central for some reason. That's on the other side of the state. We've never lived there, so I don't know why I keep thinking it's there. Well, I'm going to do a 2-minute shout-out for reasons. And Goodbye.
Boogie, boogie, boogie. Oh, so, okay, hi. Hello. Hi.
Say goodbye.
Goodbye. Ignore the mess.